The elimination of the Healthy Homes Renovation Credit, no teacher pay increases, public sector wage freeze, along with a 10% reduction in its numbers. That's just some of what Tim Hudak outlined in today's Million Jobs Plan launch in downtown Toronto. And joining us now for more on his plan, here is Tim Hudak, the leader of the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party and the candidate in the riding of Niagara West Glanbrook. And, of course, we welcome you back to TVO.
Thanks for being back on the show. And, Steve, thanks for being there for Platform Lunch. I know your schedule is very busy. Really appreciate the fact that you took the time to be there.
That's just doing my job,
Front
sir.
and center, I was watching you to see if you were nodding in agreement.
I don't think I was nodding in agreement. I wasn't nodding at all. Anyway, let's just clarify. We're going to get to the plan. I first want to start just asking a question about you. This is your second election as leader. The first one didn't go the way you wanted it to. You're now a week and change into the second campaign. How are you a different leader today than you were 2.5 years ago?
I'm having a lot more fun, I think, as you could tell. But more importantly, I'm talking about my plan. I spent a lot of time thinking about what was going to make the difference, get people back to work in our province, get a government we can afford, how we can make sure government works for real people, not just the insiders. You can see that in the plan. You saw my presentation today from the heart, no notes, just here's where we're going, here's the plan, it's all black and white. So you're seeing a leader, Steve, that knows what he's about, knows what he believes in, is confident he's got the right plan, and fighting for, with a very singular focus, on more jobs, better jobs. And I think you'll all see in the campaign, these first, 10 days or so, that I'm not so much saying what's wrong with the other guys, what's wrong with their plan, I'm talking about what's right about ours.
Is one of the things that you learned from last time that some of those extraneous issues, like foreign workers and chain gangs and all that, they don't work, and that's why you haven't gone that way this time?
No, this is about a plan that actually hangs together. Right? When I looked around the province, and I've traveled a lot, I have a job at Queen's Park to hold the government to account. I also have a job to make sure I put an alternative on the table. I've got a job to speak honestly to taxpayers about the mess that we find ourselves in, and also to offer a credible turnaround plan for the province. And as I traveled across Ontario, I came to this very clear conclusion. It's all about jobs. It's all about making sure people can earn a good paycheck, they can provide for their families. It's all about saying to that young person watching at home who has her degree from U of T, but she's still home with mom and dad, that she's got a bright future, a chance for a good career job, a place of her own. And from those jobs I outlined earlier today with our platform, then you have the revenue coming in for things we care about, helping our most vulnerable populations, high quality home care, and making sure kids in our classrooms get the best education anywhere in North America.
If it's all about jobs, and I have seen you in the Ontario legislature get up and say, the moment I wake up from a good night's sleep, the first thing I'm thinking about is how to create jobs in Ontario. I've seen you give that speech numerous times. And yet, you made an announcement the other day which suggested that you wanted to fire 100,000 people in the broader public sector. And I'm trying to figure out how the guy who wakes up every day thinking about how to create jobs squares that position with the guy who says, I need to lay off 100,000 people.
When I talk to employers or groups like the Chamber of Commerce, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, they're a strong spokes group for small business. Steve, when I ask them, what's the most important thing we can do to give you confidence to add more men and women to your payroll? They don't say it's energy, well, that's important. They don't say it's taxes, that's important too, or red tape. They say we want a government that spends within its means. We want less debt on our backs. After all, who's investing in Detroit, Michigan these days, or Greece? The first order of business, mission critical to job creation, is balancing the budget. And if anybody comes on the agenda and says they can balance the budget, eliminate a $12 billion deficit, and not touch payroll, which is more than 50 cents in a dollar, either they're naive or they think your audience is.
Well, they don't say that, but they say, just give us another year to do it. We'll take 3 years, you'll do it in 2.
Which they keep postponing year after year. And you know this at home, and your viewers do too. If you sweep something under the carpet, it doesn't go away. Often it gets worse. A number of the things that you talked about at the opening of the show, those are recommendations by the Drummond Commission. And look, from time to time, I've not been exactly the biggest fan of this government, but I'll give credit where credit's due. They did a good job. If we had implemented the Drummond Commission a couple of years ago, we'd have more jobs in our province. We'd probably have a balanced budget. So it's a matter of when do you actually take action? I've got a plan to balance the budget. I do that because I want to create more jobs in our province for young people, for people who've lost their jobs in industry and are struggling to get by in a part-time job. The other two leaders, they're focused on being popular. They'll kick this decision down the road, but if you don't address it now, the hole to climb out of is that much deeper.
Okay, but let's take a look at one of those Drummond recommendations. You say you're going to save money by allowing class sizes to go up. I don't know any parents in Ontario who want their kids in bigger classrooms. So how do you make that one sing?
There's only so many dollars that are there. And if we keep spending, and when you're spending more than you take in, you're borrowing. When you're spending, borrowing, driving up debt, that means that we have less money when we pay back that interest to go to help out special needs kids.
Okay, but you're saying to parents, you're going to have to deal with bigger classrooms, right?
That's right. I think it's time we had an honest conversation about the choices. So we have to make some decisions. I mean, do we want to have 10,000 more bureaucrats in the school boards, or do you want to help special needs kids? Are we satisfied that more than 25% of our students aren't passing basic tests when it comes to literacy, or our math score is in decline? It's a matter of making choices. Choices to make sure we grow the economy, with balancing our budget, lower taxes, affordable energy, but also trade-offs in the system. So it does mean that there'll be 2 or 3 kids in an average class more. But it also means that we can keep full-day kindergarten. It means we'll have the resources to help that special needs kid. It means that we can bring in teachers who will specialize in math to turn around a declining test scores. I've made my choices. I don't think the other 2 leaders have made any choices at all.
I get that's your position, but one of the Drummond recommendations is to fire 9,700 education workers from that sector. Is that not to have any impact on the classroom at all?
Well, those are positions outside of the classroom. I think you remember from the Drummond recommendation, it is one that we endorsed. Let me tell you why. Again, every decision I make is focused on what's it going to do to grow our economy, provide more opportunity for Ontarians. More people are working, and again, our plan is 1 million new jobs in our province. Good, steady job, you're paying steady taxes. It means we'll have the funds there then to make sure we've got that latest drug to help fight cancer. It means that Maddie Vanstone, who's been on your show, can actually get the treatment she needs instead of seeing her life deteriorate. So we've got some choices. The healthcare budget needs to increase. I gave you 2 examples why. Education, Steve, we actually have 225,000 fewer students in our schools. We spend $8.5 billion more, and our test scores are declining in mathematics. So the choice is between eliminating a lot of school board positions outside of the classroom so we can have more nurses, or a drug treatment for a young person who's 9 years old and trying to live. I know where I stand.
Okay, let's get back to that original question, though, which is, how do you convince people you're the guy who's all about creating jobs when you want to fire 100,000 people from the broader public sector? Does that sound off message to you?
No, because balancing the budget is step number 1 towards saying that Ontario is open for investment again. Look, we can take this into our own hands, choose our destiny, and make the long, overdue, but necessary decisions to spend within our means. You've asked me about some of those choices. I've made mine, but they don't get any easier if you pass them down the road. Or the creditors can come in and tell us what to do. That was pretty ugly in Europe.
What happens to those 100,000 people?
So let me explain that. For every job that we'll lose in the public sector, we're going to gain more than 10 more in the private sector.
How do you know? How do you know?
It's pretty basic economics. When you ask employers, when you ask job creators, what happens when the government's deep in debt? Why aren't you investing in Ontario today? They say, because the government's deep in debt is going to increase my taxes. They won't invest in our subways, our highway system. I mean, does that sound familiar? And if we keep digging this hole deeper in debt, we're going to lose more jobs. We just lost 300 at Unilever. The man I talk about who's parking cars for half the wage he used to when the hotels finally do call in Niagara Falls lost his job at John Deere. If the biggest weight holding our economy back is government debt, isn't that the first one we should address to clear the way for 1 million more jobs?
Well, okay, except that I look at what the Conference Board of Canada says, who say if you want to do this, it's going to cost us 0.5 point of economic growth. I look at what the Congressional Budget Office in the United States said. These are both nonpartisan organizations that say if whatever future government does this kind of action, it comes with a cost attached to it. You will sacrifice some of the economic growth you're counting on in order to realize the revenues and balance that budget early. So how does that get us further ahead?
The first thing you do when you're in a hole is you stop digging. Drop the shovel. But you also need a plan to climb your way out of that. That's why I brought forward our plan, the Million Jobs Plan, and your viewers can see the whole thing at millionjobsplan.com. I encourage them to go look at that. I'm excited about it. It's going to work. That means getting tax rates down on employers to the lowest in North America. So that we're going to do that next. Machine is going to be here in Ontario. The next expansion will be in our province, 120,000 jobs right there. More affordable energy by stopping the runaway subsidies for wind and solar projects, downsizing the hydro bureaucracy, 40,000 jobs right there. Making sure that we invest the right funds in our transportation system, 96 there, 200,000 jobs. Let's go trades. I can go on and on towards that 1 million jobs. But the first order of business is you have to have a government that spends within its means. Otherwise, they pick up roots and they move to Ohio, they move to Alberta, they move to Michigan.
Are you not making assumptions? I think if I understand your plan, it is based on various assumptions. If I cut taxes by this much, private companies will therefore create X number of jobs. Except that we've just seen over the last 5 or 6 years, maybe even longer, the Ontario Liberals actually have cut corporate taxes pretty dramatically. And so have the federal Conservatives. And yet, Jim Flaherty, may he rest in peace, was certainly a mentor of yours, a good friend of yours, chided the private sector for failing to create jobs despite all the tax cuts he threw at them. The jobs didn't materialize. The former governor of the Bank of Canada said, you people are sitting on dead money. You're not hiring. How can you be sure your tax cuts are going to work when these tax cuts for the last half decade haven't?
Well, I'll argue with the premise of the question. I could probably spend the show on it, but I believe that lower taxes create more jobs than higher taxes.
They haven't so far, though.
Well, I'll argue with that because I think the actual experience has been the opposite. Have they invested in Ontario? No, but no wonder. I mean, if I was pitching to you as a company, you're looking to invest somewhere in North America, and I said, Steve, I'm representing the province of Ontario under the Liberal government. We have the most expensive hydro rates anywhere for industry in North America. We're deep in debt. We're planning to increase taxes again on your employees, and we're going to have potentially another credit rating downgrade. You're not going to invest in Ontario. You go elsewhere. That's happening each and every day. So I think we have to hit the brakes. We have to go in a different direction, one with more affordable energy, lower taxes, and right-sized government. It's the right thing to do because the current path, it's not working for anybody.
Let me ask you another question about you, because you frequently talk about your mother, who was in the education system, your father, who was in the education system. You have a sister who's a teacher as well?
That's right, exactly.
Okay, so the 3 closest people in the world to you from your original nuclear family were all unionized people who made a decent living and enabled you to have the life that you have had. And yet, you are taking on the unions like nobody I've seen since a guy named Mike Harris. And I'm wondering, where did this falling out with the unions happen, given that the union movement's been responsible for whatever nice middle-class life Tim Hudak enjoyed?
Well, I mean, let's be clear, and let's distinguish between the union leadership and the workers. My parents were the workers. And if there are union leaders who are interested in creating jobs, making the province of Ontario more attractive for investment, I'm with them. We've had a number of unions that have supported parts of our plan, like eliminating the College of Trades to create 200,000 more jobs in the skilled trades. If you're a union leader more concerned about protecting your own nest and the benefits you have with this government, I'm not with you. But Steve, when I hear Smokey Thomas, who I get along with well, we've had conversations like you and I just without the cameras on.
Head of OPSU.
We don't often agree, the head of OPSU and I, but he's a straight shooter and so am I. And when Smokey Thomas, the head of OPSU, says there's 64,000 positions in middle management in the government we don't need, I'm looking forward to working with him, identifying those positions so we can balance the budget and then invest in areas where we need more service, like help for special needs kids, nurses, and personal support workers.
He has not endorsed your plan, I don't believe.
I suspect he won't endorse my plan, but I like his idea on the 64,000.
But is there something, was there something that happened in your upbringing as it relates to the union movement that has made you kind of sour on union leadership nowadays?
You know, the opposite. I'll tell you what, my grandpa, this is my mom's side of the Dillon family, was a union leader in the petrochemical industry down in Sarnia, strong man, strong leader. And he saw in me a love of public life. So I remember sitting on his knee and then I was a bit older talking about his experiences, his learning. And he was always there to fight for the little guy, to fight for the worker. Grandpa Dillon was one of the first who pushed for dental benefits because he was looking at the long term, not the short term. But when he sees what's happening today, where we have some union leaders like Pat Dillon and Sid Ryan who are putting their own special interests, trying to be politicians instead of fighting for the little guy, I think that they've lost touch. I'm there with the little guy. I'm there for the person who's looking to create jobs. I'm looking for the person who wants to invest in the front lines, not middle management. I look forward to working with union leaders like that. But if they want me to jump when they say how high when it comes to agreeing to all the demands of the union bosses, those are the other 2 leaders. I'm the one that's going to stand up for taxpayers.
You would like to take 27 cabinet ministries and cut it down to 16. So what's going out?
We actually put out a model for that. Would love advice on that. We're still obviously going to make sure that we focus on what's most important. But the reason I go from 27 to 16, having been there at the cabinet table, now watching from my seat in the official opposition as cabinet gets, I think there are more people in cabinet now than there are not in cabinet. First of all, leadership starts at the top. I think it's important for us to set the direction there'll be fewer cabinet ministers. Secondly, the more people you have around the table, the less focused you are. I want to make sure we have a team that's focused on job creation and balancing the books.
So what ministries go?
You want me to get the whole
Yeah, what ministries are getting cut?
We merge a series of ministries. We eliminate some altogether. I'll give you an example. We want to make sure that children's mental health services become a priority. I think you were there for that part of my presentation. I think that mental health care has been in the shadows for far too long. I heard a heartbreaking story of a mom whose, I think, 12-year-old daughter wanted to end her life. And that mom up every night worrying if when that door opens or she hears the window if her daughter's leaving and she'll never see her alive again. When she finds out she has an 18-month waiting period, that tells me the current system isn't working. So instead of having a separate bureaucracy, why don't we tear down these barriers so we invest more in services to make mental health care actually as important as physical health care in our system. So it's not what cabinet minister has the title, it's who actually can take care of vulnerable people, help out that mom, and point that daughter on a much better path.
Andrea Horvath made the same announcement this morning, incidentally. She also wants to cut the number of cabinet jobs by a third. You two agree on a lot of things.
we get along all right from time to time.
It's a little strange, actually.
Don't know if I'll get her vote, but I'll keep working on it.
I'm not sure. Are you a proud Mike Harris disciple?
I'm proud of our record. I was proud to be part of that government. And look, if, you know, when we see a government that actually led North America in job creation, made some tough and long overdue calls, and we were #1 in job creation, not only in Canada and North America, I stand by that record.
You still call him for advice?
Sure. And if your viewers are going to vote based on my being at the cabinet table, pro or con, that's up to them. If they want to see what the next 8 years will look like, as opposed to the past, look at my plan. I don't think there's been another leader who has been as crystal clear on where he or she stands. There's been no other leader who's actually put out a plan to create jobs in our province, to grow the economy. And I think no other leader who's actually been as honest and direct with taxpayers about the choices we need to make now before we're going to spiral into an even greater debt crisis.
I would think you would listen to Mike Harris because he's the last Conservative premier, I think, since the 1950s to have won back-to-back majority governments, which is something I suspect you'd like to do. What kind of advice does he give you?
Tell people what you want to do, and then do it. Lay out a plan and stick to it. And people reward that. My dad was similar, too. I mean, my dad is similar. He was a high school principal, came from a very modest family background, son of immigrants, first in his family to go to university. You mentioned earlier, became a teacher and then a high school principal. And he said, Tim, at some point you're going to come to crossroads in your career where you can focus on being popular or respected. He did that too. He focused on respect. He built a high school that started about 300 students. He made the tough decisions. He stood up to the school boards, and he stood up to a few union leaders as well to make sure he had the best teachers in front of the kids in that classroom, that they had the best programs from sports to tech to the arts. That school now is about 1,500 kids. Then the popularity came after because it chose to be respected. If you chose simply to be popular, you sacrifice the future for the present. You betray your principles, and you get nothing done.
I don't mean this to be like a smart aleck here, but are you choosing respect over popularity because you're not popular? Every poll shows you're not popular.
I made the choice in the beginning to lay out a very clear plan. And look, if you're looking to have a guest on your show or somebody there in question period who's going to be the best actor on the stage, who will come to you and look you in the eye and make you all kinds of promises that they know that they can't keep, that's not me. Nothing fancy about me. You know where I stand. You know where my focus is. It's getting more people working in our province. It's to say to that entrepreneur that there's no better place in Ontario for her to start her new business. It's to say to that small business person struggling to make ends meet, you can have more customers through your door. You can hire more men and women again. That's what I'm all about. I'm not the best actor. I'm the guy with the turnaround plan.
In our last 30 seconds here, let me just talk a little sort of brass knuckles politics with you. And that is it a majority for you or you're out? And I ask that because it's hard for me to see where you get a partner to operate a minority government. So, majority or bust for Tim Hudak?
You deal with, I guess, you deal with the cards that you're dealt. And obviously, the more members we have, the better we can do at getting Ontario back to work. I think one thing you know about me, Steve, and you've known me for a long time, I actually make every effort to develop strong relations with the people, even if we don't agree eye to eye. I've had probably 7 or 8 meetings with Kathleen Wynne, a number of meetings with Andrea Horvath. I don't go out and tell the media about that, just so we can actually get a good relationship. whatever hand we're all dealt at the end of this, I look forward to working with them both to make sure we can actually put real people ahead of the special interest, that we can get our economy growing again. That's where my focus is going to be. I welcome their advice on that, and I actually make sure they can build relationships, because I think that they too care about jobs. I disagree with their path on how to get there. Obviously, I think mine is right, but I look forward to their advice, because we got to get this province out of the rut we're in and back on a better path. The sooner we do it, the better off we're all going to be.
Tim Hudak, we thank you for coming into TVO tonight to talk to our viewers, and as I will say to all the leaders, good luck out there on the hustings.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks
That's
for the time.
Tim Hudak, Leader of the Opposition, PC candidate, Niagara West Glanbrook, and the Leader of the Ontario Conservatives.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.